Today we are heading into Balboa Park by way of the historic Cabrillo Bridge. We'll cross through the West Gate to the stunning California Quadrangle and turn to face the buildings on the left. The California Building, with its ornate facade and blue and gold dome, and the adjoining California Tower. Together, these two buildings are among the most recognizable landmarks in San Diego. The buildings were built in 1915 for the Panama, California Exposition and served as the Expo's grand entrance. Designed by architect Bertram Goodhue, the California buildings are a combination of elements from many styles, most you probably haven't heard of, including Gothic, Plateresque, Baroque, Churrigueresque, and Rococo, to create the impression of a Spanish colonial Catholic church. The building's facade features stone ornamentation as well as many historical figures and busts sculpted from modeling clay and plaster, depicting prominent people from California, England, Mexico, and Spain. The California Tower is 198 feet tall and opened for public tours if you have the stamina to climb up the 152 steps, including a narrow spiral staircase, and you aren't afraid of heights. It is certainly worth it for the views and to get a really good look at the dome and its gorgeous tiles. Something else you can only see from up there? One of those curved ribs sort of look like stairs. And guess what? They are steps. That's how workers got up onto the dome for cleaning and repairs. Thanks, but no thanks. The great central dome of the California building is encircled with a Latin inscription which translates to a land of wheat and barley and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey. There's also the California motto, Eureka. Since the tower has been described as San Diego's icon and considered the most photographed and best-known landmark in San Diego, it's only fitting that we find a comfortable spot from which to sketch it. Time for testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Time for testing 1, 2, 3, 4. We're sketching the California Tower and Dome today from a vantage point that's just on the south side of the Alcazar Garden. There are walkways and planting areas by a parking lot that offer good places to stand. If you're sketching on occasion, that is. It's where I took this photo. You could even be sitting in your car sketching if you're more comfortable. Plenty of urban sketchers do that. So let's look at our subject as simple forms. Can you see it as a tall, skinny rectangle, sort of, with a half circle beside it? We're going to approach it like a series of boxes stacking on top of one another. Each box gets bigger as they get lower. The bottom one is the biggest and the tallest. And this curved shape, the dome, it has a little box on it too. I'll give some outline to the trees, and then let's give the whole sketch an outline or boundary. That'll be the easiest way to break it down. Well, let's start sketching. We've already taken a look at how this tower is like a series of blocks that start big and get a little smaller as they go up. It's like those stacking blocks that you've seen some kids play with. Maybe you even had some. Something else that is interesting that I didn't even realize until a friend pointed it out is that the lower portions of the tower are square in plan, but they change shape as they go up to the top. So those bottom two squares, they're, well, square, meaning that there are four sides. We can only see one side from this view. But the next upper two are octagonal. That means they have 8 sides instead of 4. We can see 3 of those 8 sides from our vantage point. And at the very top, it's circular. And we know that because we can see the curving lines going back. So let's start making our stacking blocks. I'll start to the right side of the sheet up near the top, and I'll make a little square. And then below it, I'm going to make another square, a little bit bigger in height and width, and then another. You're going to notice that I'm holding my pencil kind of loose, and I'm not choking up on it as if I were writing. I'm holding it loose for a couple of reasons. One is it allows me to keep the lines pretty light and sketchy, and it prevents me from pushing too hard, We don't want to carve into the paper, or else it'd be too hard to erase those first lines later on. And lastly, it keeps my lines a little freer. We aren't into the details yet, and we don't mind making mistakes at this point. There are still some decisions we'll be making in the sketch, and loose, free lines at this point keeps us a little uncommitted. And this bottom square is actually more like a tall rectangle. But let's concentrate on the tower first before we sketch in the dome. So let's go back up to the top. Remember, I told you that it's a circular form sitting on top of an octagon, on top of another octagon, on top of a square, on top of another square. So we'll start with the little dome on top. I'm going to ask you to put a little circle in your square, like that. Now sketch a little curving line through the circle, like a frowning face, if you will. And because we're looking up at the circle, we're seeing this center line of the dome and the edges turn down. Have your eraser close by as you go, because we'll want to take some of these lines away, just so that they're not too confusing. I'm just removing the corners of that square so that the circle is a little clearer. Before we get to the octagon below, you'll see that there is another ring right there. So let's give it just a little curving line, like that. All right, and now for our next little block. Let's lightly sketch two little vertical lines to divide the shape into thirds. And at the top of this middle section, we want to give it a little horizontal line. And then off to this right side, we'll make a line that slopes down a little. And on the other, left side, we'll add a line that slopes in the other direction. We're ignoring a lot of the little details for now. I know it's hard because there are so many cute details and interesting curlicues. It's what drew us to the building in the first place. But once we get the overall shape locked out, we can decide what we want to add and what the sketch needs. Let's jump to the next one down. And this one's a little clearer. See how there's the flat portion, and then the side, and then the side. And also notice that the right side, which is kind of closer to us, we see more of it. This section is wider than this one on the other side. Add two more vertical lines as you did in that upper shape. And add the lines on the sides that slope down a wee bit. Again, there's so much detail that the sketch will really come together just in getting our lights and darks. All right, so we've got our first three kind of blocked out. We hit our circle, our first octagon, our second octagon, and now we get to this level where it's a square. And we're going to give it, for the time being, we'll make a little straight line, though it's got some bumps in it now. Then a little bit below it, give us another line. And then come to the bottom of it. See how we're a little wider? It doesn't look like a square anymore because we've kind of taken that off. So make another line near the bottom. Okay, then we've got, I'm seeing two lines close together. Oops, this line looks a little high. I'm going to erase it. And then we can see the side on the left, and on the right it's going to be this fun little squiggly line, which are the trees. If you're still with me, we've got a good start. Now let's go in and put in some of the really obvious objects, because to get your sketch to read, in this sketch, squinting a lot really helps, and that tells you, well, what can I really see? Because from far away, you can't see so much of all this detail. So let's get the bigger items in. Let's, going back to the top, in this middle little rectangle, if you put a little horizontal line in there, give it a little arch, come down to the octagon below it, And do the same thing, 2 little lines and give it an arch. And then this one, same thing, 2 lines, give it an arch top. There are a few other little dark rectangles. There's a cutest ever little balcony. If you were in the tower, if you remember some of the introduction video when we were talking, you saw this curved railing because you were inside looking out, and you can see that spiral stair going up inside there. Looks so tall. So we have a little curvy line, and there's another little scalloped, like a balcony below it. And if you can make that little balcony like that, and then the cutest little opening down below. I wonder if you can see, I wonder if that's like a door opening. I haven't been inside, so this one of these days I will go in there. Have you been in there? Okay. What else? There's a little bitty window floating way down here. Great. A few other things. We might want to put a few little parallel lines in here because you know what they're going to become? These look like sort of like columns. And up at the top of them, it's like they go up and down and up and down. Remember to keep all your lines pretty light because at some point we're going to be erasing them. Just above them, this has sort of an up and down too, very subtle. There. There's some ups and downs. Each of these little openings, these arched openings, has a little horizontal line at what they call the spring line. That's where it goes from being a vertical line to the arch. That's the spring line. You see some little lines there. This one has a very tiny one, but at the spring line. Now this has also got, I don't know if they call that the bell tower or what they call that, but up here there's also a little arch, and it's shorter than the one in the middle. There's another one on the other side, and they're very skinny because you're seeing them from an angle. So if you can make very skinny, we'll give it some shade and shadow in a little bit when we come back to add the detail. If you want on the right hand side to just add a second line, because we sort of see the side over here, so side of each a little shorter, make a line. There's our tower for the most part. Other fun things that we want to come back and add is at the top of some of these little areas, there are these funny little finials, I'd call them. It's kind of like a circle with a point on top. They need to be made really tiny, otherwise they take on too much importance. So if you can keep them nice and tiny, you're doing good. This, the 1, 2, 3rd square down, has some funny little bulges coming out off the side, so make some squiggly lines. That's the next thing we're going to talk about when we start to ink, is how we're going to add so much detail to this without adding any detail to this. And it's all going to be in the use of a squiggly line. There's two little rectangular openings here in this rectangular portion, this square portion where the bigger arch is. There's 2 vertical rectangular openings there. Okay, we're ready to add the dome now. Before we start the dome, I'd like to give you some pointers that I've learned over the years of trying to sketch circles. After all the years, I can just freehand a circle, but for many years, my circles would look like ovals. They might look like kidney beans, no matter how hard I tried. So I found that it's easier for me to sketch a square. I might put the center line, both directions of the square, and then I round the corners, and there's a circle, pretty closely shaped like a circle. In this case, we're doing half a circle. We're going to do a dome. So I'd start it, I might start it in the same way where I'd find the center line in both directions. The horizontal center line is going to be the bottom of the dome, and then just round the two corners. I didn't really need to make a whole square. I could have just done the rectangle like that. And there's a dome. And in our case, these center lines, when we get to it, that center line is going to be important for us because we don't really see the whole dome. Part of it is obscured by the tower. It's hidden behind the tower. So now let's try our dome. The best way to get the size and proportions of the dome correct is to reference the tower you just sketched in. You know, a lot of times I'll use my pencil to measure some things. Let's see what we can find that works. Here's the width of the tower. Okay, so the dome is just a tiny bit wider than the width of the tower. So let's come over here and see how wide did I make my tower in the sketch. So I carry that line over and make a dot. That's the width of the tower as I've sketched it, but I want to make a little wider there. So I'll make a little line. The, the very top of this cupola aligns with the bottom of that arched opening. The top of the dome itself, is a little closer to, it's above the halfway point of this section. So I'm gonna go up about like that. Yes, it's where the window is, but I just put the window in wherever. I'm gonna go up about like that. This gives us the beginning of our rectangle. And now we can find the center line. The center of our dome is a lot closer to the tower. So find your center line of this little shape right here, and the center of the dome is going to be over in this area. Did you follow that? So what I did is I found the width of the tower that I had sketched. Do it with the other hand. Find the width, make a mark. We know we're a little wider, so there's that. The height of it is a little more than the halfway point of this bottom square shape. So let's go up a little bit. And then the center of it, if we come back here and we see just how wide our dome is, if that's how wide our dome is, that's the center from the edge to the edge of the tower. Well, look at that cupola is scooted way over closer to the tower. And so that's what I'm trying to show is how to find it. You can eyeball it. Just make a vertical line closer to the tower than the center of this shape. So let's say it's like that. Start finding it's sort of rectangular, a little bit round like that. Okay, so what that's done is it's given us the top of the dome, and we want to make our dome shape like that. If we were to finish it as a big circle, it would look like this, sort of overlapping the tower. And then I'm going to start erasing some of these stray lines that I did that was helping me figure out where I was. I may be a little taller than the tower, but I'm okay. And yours will be fine too. Eyeball it, adjust it, see what you want to modify. You're still in pencil, you're not choking on your pencil, so your lines are still light. And if your lines are getting dark, you'll just get a bigger eraser when the time comes. All right, you want to erase some stray lines. There's a little pointy thing up here. Funny little, in the photo we can just barely see. It's a star. I found some photos of what it looks like, but when I was standing in that parking lot in that little garden area, couldn't see what it was. I was too far away. There's some little window openings in here. Okay, so there's also some ribs. There's the edge of the dome, and there are ribs coming out toward us and another rib going away from us. So it doesn't come straight down. It's curving. I'm just going to ask you to eyeball it a little bit. There are two lines. There's another one going in this direction. And the first time I sketched this, I put it too far away. So leave enough sort of open space here and bring this guy in like that. How's he look? I'd like to take a moment to talk about this really busy and confusing area. It's not part of the dome, it's the facade of the Museum of Us in the foreground. Remember the wall with the 9 men statues? From where I was standing, the very top of that wall was sticking up in my view, but because I couldn't see the rest of it, it doesn't make any sense. So we're going to leave it out. Instead, let's add what's really happening at the bottom of the dome. And for that, we need to look at some other photos. This photo shows the tower and it shows the dome, but it doesn't have as much stuff in front. This window, which is right in the middle here, let's make a rectangle that sort of straddles this straight line that we've done here. Make a rectangle like that. Give it a little arch top, two little lines, some lines on either side like that. And then at the bottom of the window, I'd like you to make another straight line. It's actually, this too is a multi-sided shape. I don't know if it's I think the dome is actually an octagon. And then we're going to let the trees, remember from our original sketch, we're going to let the trees do all this other stuff. But from here, you can just make a few little light lines. There's a little zigzaggy of the tile you can give a hint at if you want. Mostly when we get to this, we're going to concentrate on things that really show up the lights and the darks. There's the letters, but remember they were in Latin, so just sketch in letters if you want to. And if you wanted to, there's the diamond in the middle of the star. Be really light here. There's the star. It's got 8 sides to it. You do sort of see this star too. Okay, let's go back to the original sketch, the original reference photo. So we've added the window and we've added a little of this stuff. And then let's just say the trees are going to frame it. I'm going to give it an edge so that we don't have to keep sketching. It's actually a pretty composition, don't you think? The trees down below frame it as if they're sort of a peek through. And then we'll do our leaves with pen. If you want, I mean, you could leave the whole upper area to blue sky, or we can we'll get some of that tree growing in, which we'll do some leaves up there, branches. It frames the building. I think we're ready to ink it. Before we start inking, let's just double check our pencil sketch against our reference photo and see if there's anything we'd like to adjust or like to add. There may be a few little details up in here. Also, the dome itself, the little circle up at the top, looks a little wide in my sketch. I don't know how yours looks, but now is the time to adjust a few things. And also a good time if you need to remove any little stray marks, if you want to lighten up your pencils. Also, I didn't talk about that little weather vane on top of the tower itself. In the day that I was there, the weather vane was angled in such a way that I couldn't see what it was. But I went back and looked, and I looked online. I just did a Google search for what's that weather vane sitting on top of the California Tower, and it's a ship. And we can't really see it, so I'm just going to make some little squiggly marks like that. The other interesting thing I found out is on top of the dome, some of these black tiles are actually half circles. So cool. So, but we can't really get into the kind of detail, that kind of detail. If you wanted to get into that kind of detail in your sketch, you probably should zoom in or be sketching on a larger piece of paper. Okay, so I think we're ready to start. I'm going to suggest a couple of things in our inking. Let's work our way down just like we did with the pencil sketch. And the other thing is, see how much detail is in there? We'll never get that accurately. But if we do a bunch of just sort of like we did with the pencil, keeping our hand loose and a lot of scribbles. So I'll show you what I mean as we go down. But for now, it's just simple little lines, mostly where there's shadow. And you can outline your dome, the circles. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll put the lines on the shadow side, but maybe I'll leave them off, or I'll do them as dashed lines where the light is hitting it on the sunny side. And then we just work our way down and emphasizing a little more where the shadows are, where we see lines. It might help if you squint a little. Then you can really see where the blacks are and the dark grays versus where the lights are. And those are the areas we want to hit with a little bit more ink. So we have a little here. We'll come down to the side. Those little filial things come down the side. We have the shadow in that arched top window. We've got a really dark area in this arched top window. And what you can do is start to fill some of these in, and then later you can come back and add even more. So keeping it sort of light to begin with and not too dark. And little squiggles give it character. Now we'll go to the next little area. We won't put in any of these filials just yet. I mean, you could do one if you want, one of the really clear ones. And then let's go down to this area. You'll see that it's sort of square on either side, and then it off to the sides, it's sort of swooping back. There's a little more shadow. Like be looking at your reference photo, and where there's a little more shadow, go ahead and add it. And then coming down to this side in profile, we're seeing a lot of curvy things. And this is where I'm talking about my pen. It'll go straight, but then it'll get squiggly. And there I've just given enough hint at, that there's something going on here. That Chirigaresque, I have a hard time pronouncing that, which is that style of architecture where they use that really ornate plaster treatment. You don't see it very often. You see it here in Balboa Park. You'll see that style of architecture in Spain. You won't see much, too many other places. Maybe some places in Mexico. Okay, again, I'm doing some funny little loose squiggly lines just to give a hint at where that ornate stuff is happening. Okay, down to the next. See, it inks in pretty fast because there's just, even though it's so detailed, not much of it is detail that we can see. And so we don't want to give it too much attention until we don't want to give all that detail too much attention, just to give a hint at what's going on. So I'm getting the shadows in here, little more shadow up here that I didn't. And then we get down to this bigger arched opening. And one of the things that we can do, I don't know if you can see, leaving a little arched opening in the back. You see how it's there? So leave that in the back, because when you go and hit the blue sky in your sketch, you'll be able to see that. Sketching in some of these darker areas. And oftentimes we'll put in, when we go inking, we'll do line, shape, detail, and tonal value. This is sort of an exception where the tonal value, these dark shapes, are what's making our sketch read. So we don't have like a shadow side necessarily. We've got shadow insides. So that's why I'm sort of doing some of the shading as I go. All right, so there's a lot of ornate stuff here. So there's sort of these vertical columns that have some funny stuff going on. So I'm just giving them some little lines like that, sort of breaking them up. These things remind me of some Egyptian like shapes, mummies. That's about as much detail as I'm willing to give it out here. So a lot of dashed lines really help with something this busy. Dashed lines and dots, just to say something's happening. I don't know what's happened. I don't want to tell you the details. It's just giving you you're just giving the viewer a hint. And then if you wanted to work back up and down, just, but it probably would be better if we wait until we get all of it done. We erase our pencil lines and then just see what's left. There's a couple little lines and bumps here. I don't know if you can see them. Just give a hint. And then that fun little scalloped balcony might just be a series of little like eyelashes. There is a railing in there. It's too tiny to even see. That little shadow underneath this pop out. Edge of the tower. See how I sort of wiggle my hand? Looks like the tower's not perfectly straight. There's like some detail in there. So I just wiggled my hand as I went down a little bit. Same on the other side. Okay, now we can get to our dome. And again, I'd keep your pen loose. Use some broken lines like that. And just can retrace our steps. However you'd like to fill it in. And again, check your proportions. Is there anything that you wish in pencil that you had changed a little? And then I'd make just a series of dots for that weather vane on top of the bell tower. Because if you can't even see it in the photo hardly. So we want to make sure we don't give it too much importance. Then somebody will look at your sketch and think, oh, you did a sketch of weather vanes, when it was really, we did it of towers. If you wanted to, you could pretend you were on that side that had the little steps up and give a little hint at those steps. We don't see them from this side, but now that you know that they're there on one side, your sketch could just pretend you were on that side. Okay. Then the window. You're seeing it at a bit of an angle, so you'll see more lines on the left. And then if you want, there are some buttons in the window, so you could put in a little grid. We're going to darken it in with some diagonal lines like this to show that it's glazing in there. If you want to just hint at the tile work, you can, keeping in mind that even though certain parts are darker, it's just color. It's not like it's the shade and shadow. And it's the shade and shadow that we want to give the most darkest darks and lightest lights to. Darkest darks. All right. How are you doing? Now, there's, if we go back to our one reference photo, there are some fun little filials in here. It's, if you wanted to sketch them in some circles, like that. And then if you wanted to give some sort of hint to the starburst. Remember to keep your pen really light when it's just a color that you're representing and not a shadow. So those tiles, you want to keep the pen really light when you're doing the images on the tiles. What else have we left off? There was a little bit of the writing and the tile work in here, but I think if you just gave it a few lines as if they're letters, or you could have some fun if you wanted to sign your drawing. You could put your name up in there. Now, how about we add some leaves? And you don't need to be exact. This is a whole series of little squiggly lines to show branches, leaves. The leaves on these particular trees are pretty uniform, so it's not like they have much shape to them, and they're growing out in little clusters. So my leaves are just a series of sort of squiggly, sort of roundish clusters like this. And I'm using it to frame the building because I don't have enough information to finish sketching more on the building. I'm using a straight line in my frame, and then I think it'd be fun to add some trees. Now, this is a eucalyptus tree, whereas this was maybe more of a ficus with the rounded leaves. If you would like, the branches are there. The leaves are longer and skinnier. You could change the shape of your squiggles to be longer and skinnier like this. And if you wanted to maybe put a few that aren't attached as if they're, because sometimes you don't see the skinny branch, but you'll see the leaves hanging down. So be sort of rounded on the top with the little hanging down parts on the bottom. And I'm going to leave this corner without any plants in it. And I'll just keep doing some of the leaves Oftentimes I'll do the leaves until I get absolutely good and tired. And then you can always come back and add more later. Or if you find you have more time while you're sitting, a lot of sketching is about how much time and how much patience you have. You've probably seen some people's sketches where they're very detailed, and it's really admirable. Some people can sit for longer and sketch. And at some point it goes from being a sketch to a drawing. And I think that has to do partially with time and partially the need for accuracy that some people have. But with sketching, we're trying to get the essence and we're trying to get it down sort of quickly. I think I'll go back and add a little more down here to sort of be a base. And then it's time to erase and see what's missing. I can see one thing that's missing is this little window opening here. Actually, I don't know if there are windows in that tower. They're just open. Okay, I didn't do the weather vane. Keeping it really light. And I might go in and add a little more on this side. A couple of dots up there just because I thought they were so cool, those tiles. Okay, now I'm going to just wait long enough for it to dry a little. Is there anything I want to add while I'm waiting for it to dry? Maybe a couple more of these filials. If you have a kneaded eraser, that's the best thing to use. If you don't have a kneaded eraser, something like an art gun or a white, or even the back of your pencil. The back of your pencil is the one that creates the most erasure crumbs. The nice thing about a kneaded eraser is it's a little bigger and it'll take off more without leaving it crumbly. Now you can see when the pencil line and when the extra pencil lines go away, what's left. Again, squint and see if there's anything left that you'd like to add. Anything that could read a little better. Maybe a few more lines around this little arched opening for me. Tick line at the spring lines. Maybe on this hexagonal shape. Again, these are what my sketch needs, and not sure what yours needs. It could also need nothing. It could be ready. I think I'd like to add a little darker on that window, just a hint of it. Suggestion that there's a little shadow underneath a few things. We get to go and do some color, but maybe which would you like to do first? Put the name on it? Let's do color. Okay, if you've got a really good blue, that would be great. Trying to get a really rich blue would make a great sketch here, for really add to it. So I'm going to suggest we try something. Let's try keeping the blue a lot darker near the bottom to give a lot of contrast and punch to the dome and the tower, and then let it get lighter as it goes up. And a good way to do that is to start with a series of just horizontal lines. And I'm going to say, we'll just start working up. I'll show you what I'm thinking is we'll start working up and then maybe go back and darken and lighten it as you go up. I use horizontal lines, but you can use whatever direction you'd like. Just I recommend being consistent. Now, that little opening here in the tower, there's two places where the blue will show through. See how cool that is? It's when it shows through, it really shows that there are these openings in the tower. And that it's like a bell tower. And I don't usually color everything in my sketches. For instance, I don't often do the leaves. Okay, then as we get up higher here, by the way, this is where we're going to get a lot lighter and maybe stop altogether. And actually, I kind of wish I hadn't put quite so much blue in the tree, because what I meant to do, and that's also something you could do, is color it all in and then remove it. I wanted just to get, just once we get up past the middle of the tower, I want it to get a lot lighter. And then maybe not even take it all the way up. See how it has like an atmospheric effect? And I'm just adjusting the blue so it's uniform on the left and the right side of the tower, and then lightens as it goes up. Now we can add the title. We're at the California Tower. And Dome, Balboa Park. And this happens to be February 23.